he used to call every night. Now you're staring at your phone, wondering what you did wrong. Don't panic. Don't chase. Because right now, in this silence, is the moment that quietly decides everything. And what you do next won't just change how he sees you, it'll flip the entire dynamic in your favor. Here's how. When a man begins to distance himself, the first instinct for many women is to assume the worst, that he's no longer interested, that he's seeing someone else, or that he's emotionally checked out. But here's the truth most people overlook. Distance doesn't always equal disinterest. Sometimes it's confusion. Sometimes it's fear. Sometimes it's just emotional overload. Men are not always as fluent in emotions as women are, and when something feels intense, unfamiliar, or vulnerable, the natural reaction for many of them is to pull back and retreat into their own world. That space they create isn't always about pushing you away. It's often about trying to figure out what's going on inside themselves. He might be processing things that have nothing to do with you. Work stress, doubts about his own worth, fear of being hurt, or even a realization that this relationship feels more serious than he expected, which can be terrifying when someone's not ready to face it. So when he creates that gap, instead of immediately jumping to the idea that you did something wrong or that his feelings vanish overnight, take a breath and understand that his retreat might be coming from a place of internal chaos, not rejection. The worst thing to do in this moment is to personalize his behavior and try to close the gap with frantic energy. That energy often stems from anxiety, from a need to control or fix what feels uncertain. But here's the twist. Trying to fix him, fix the silence, or fix the emotional distance will only make him retreat further. Why? Because now you're not holding your own center. You're orbiting around his behavior, making his discomfort your problem to solve. And that shifts the dynamic. You move from being the high-value, grounded woman he was once drawn to into someone who feels emotionally unsafe because you're now reacting to every twitch of his emotion. Men respect women who don't panic in the face of emotional space. They admire women who can hold stillness and not demand constant reassurance. When you don't collapse into fear, when you allow him to have his space without trying to drag him out of it, you communicate something powerful without saying a word. I'm not going to chase you. I value connection, but I also value myself. That calm self-trust is deeply attractive. It doesn't mean you ignore what's happening or suppress your feelings. It means you pause before you act. You let him navigate his own emotions while you stay rooted in yours. When he senses that you're not going to be pulled into the storm, he starts to feel safer around you. Ironically, that's when many men come back. Not because you chased, but because you didn't. When a man pulls away and goes silent, most women feel an urgent pressure to fill the silence, to ask questions, to fix things, to re-establish connection. It's a normal human reaction. Silence feels like rejection, and rejection stings. But in reality, what you do during that silence says far more than any message you could send. Your behavior in those quiet, uncertain moments sends a message about your value, your confidence, and your boundaries. A lot of women believe they can talk a man back into connection, that if they just explain enough, reassure enough, or express how much they care, he'll wake up and respond. But it rarely works that way. In fact, over-communicating or reaching out repeatedly when he's gone cold often has the opposite effect. It makes him feel pressured, trapped, or even guilty, and none of those emotions bring him closer. What catches a man's attention more than words is your ability to not react. When you don't chase him, don't beg for answers. Don't let your emotional world spin out because he hasn't responded in a day. That says something. It says you're secure enough to not make his withdrawal about your worth. It says you're someone who doesn't hand over emotional control just because someone else changed their behavior. And more than anything, it shows you have emotional discipline, the kind that speaks volumes, because anyone can be calm when things are going well. It's how you handle uncertainty that reveals your inner strength. If he ignores you and you still hold your ground, still live your life, still stay focused on your peace, he sees that. He may not say it, but it leaves an impression. Men are drawn to what they respect, and nothing demands more respect than a woman who doesn't beg for attention. The quiet confidence of someone who knows they're worthy of love, whether it's being shown in the moment or not, is something most men don't forget. That stillness, that unbothered presence becomes a mirror. It forces him to reflect. If he cares, he'll start questioning why you're not reaching out. If he's emotionally mature, he'll recognize that your silence isn't a game, it's a boundary. It's a quiet statement. I'm not here to chase someone who isn't choosing me. And that's powerful. Sometimes saying nothing is the loudest way to speak. It doesn't mean playing games or pretending you don't care. It just means choosing not to participate in drama or uncertainty. It means you're not auditioning for love. You're not proving yourself. You're standing still because you know who you are, and because that silence, it's not empty. It's full of self-respect, full of clarity, full of the strength that says, if you want to be here, you know where to find me. But I won't shrink myself while you figure it out. There's something that shifts quietly, almost invisibly, when a woman starts chasing a man who's pulling away. In the beginning, he was drawn to her energy, her presence, her lightness, the way she seemed fulfilled in her own life. But when he withdraws and she begins to panic, that energy shifts. It moves from confidence to anxiety, from magnetism to need. And what most women don't realize is that this shift doesn't just change how they feel, it changes how he sees them. Men are wired to respond to emotional energy. When a woman leans too far forward, trying to reconnect, explain, or earn back his attention, it sends a subtle signal that she's no longer standing in her value. And while he may not consciously understand why, something about that makes her feel less desirable in his mind. The truth is, desire doesn't grow from pressure. It grows from space. And when a man starts to feel that space closing in on him, when her texts come more often, her energy starts to feel heavier, or she's constantly asking where they stand, he doesn't feel more connected. He feels more cornered. Even if he once liked her deeply, the chase energy she brings can begin to override those feelings. It's not because she's not good enough. It's because in that moment, she's placing his attention above her own self-worth. And that's when the attraction starts to fade. Not because she changed who she is, but because the vibe she's giving off tells him she needs his validation to feel okay again. What's magnetic isn't being available every time he disappears and returns. What's magnetic is maintaining your emotional standard, no matter how he acts. When a woman responds to distance with grounded stillness, she becomes a mirror, one that forces him to see whether or not he's showing up like a man. But when she chases, it lets him off the hook. It tells him she's willing to do the emotional heavy lifting in the relationship. And if he senses that he can go cold and still have her warmth waiting on the other side, the dynamic shifts in his favor. He doesn't have to rise. He doesn't have to work for her attention anymore. And, as unfair as it may sound, people don't value what comes too easily, not because they're cruel, but because effort is how we measure worth in relationships. So when a man starts ignoring you and you feel the urge to fix it, pause. That urge is the beginning of the energy shift. It's the moment where your value can either stay grounded or begin to slip into pursuit. And the moment you pursue from fear, fear of losing him, fear of being alone, fear of rejection. That's when the attraction you once had begins to fade from his eyes, not because you lost it, but because he can no longer see it behind the need. Every time you allow someone to treat you in a way that makes you feel small, uncertain, or disrespected, and you stay silent, you're teaching them how far they can go with you. People don't learn what you deserve by what you say you want. They learn it by what you accept. When a man begins to distance himself, ignores your messages, comes and goes when it suits him, and you continue showing up without expressing your discomfort or drawing a line, he receives a clear message. This behavior is okay with you, not because you like it, but because you're tolerating it. And tolerance is a powerful teacher. It silently communicates your standards far louder than any conversation ever will. Men don't respect women because they demand it. They respect women who live their standards. That means when something feels off, when communication drops, when the vibe changes, when you feel like you're begging for crumbs instead of being valued. You don't just sit quietly hoping it'll get better. You don't explode in anger either. You get clear. You decide what your emotional limits are and what kind of connection you're available for. If he's not willing or able to meet that, you step back, not to manipulate, not to punish, but to honor yourself, because staying in a dynamic that drains your peace just to keep someone around is emotional self-abandonment. It's tempting to think that if you just wait it out, if you just love him a little harder, if you just prove how loyal and patient you are, he'll wake up and realize how lucky he is. But that's not how it works. What usually happens is the opposite. The more you excuse his distance, the more he learns that he doesn't have to do anything differently, that he can pull away, disappear, give the bare minimum, and you'll still be there. And that's when you start feeling invisible in your own relationship. That's when the frustration builds, not just with him, but with yourself, because deep down you know you're not being true to what you need. The strongest message you can send a man is not a long speech, it's not a perfectly worded text. It's not passive aggression or emotional withdrawal. It's simply this: I value myself too much to stay where I'm not being met. And when you live that truth, not just once, but consistently, people either rise to meet you or they leave. Either way, you win. Because you're no longer stuck in a situation where you're over-giving and under-receiving. You're no longer teaching someone how to mistreat you by silently accepting it. Instead, you're showing them how to treat you by the boundaries you set, the energy you protect, and the self-worth you refuse to compromise. And that, more than anything, shifts how people see and treat you. There's a certain kind of woman who becomes unforgettable, not because she's the loudest, the most beautiful, or the most available, but because she has a life that's deeply fulfilling, with or without a man in it. She moves through her days with purpose. She's present in her friendships, committed to her goals, passionate about her hobbies. And when a man pulls away or goes quiet, she doesn't fall apart. She doesn't go into panic mode. She simply returns her focus to where it always belonged in the first place, on herself. This kind of energy is magnetic, not because she's trying to be, but because she's not waiting on someone else to make her feel whole. When a man feels you pulling back into your own life instead of chasing him, it creates a shift. Suddenly, your value becomes visible in a way it wasn't before. He starts to realize that your world doesn't pause just because he stopped texting. That realization hits different. Most people are used to others adjusting their energy based on attention and validation. So when he pulls away and expects you to chase and instead sees you shining brighter in your own lane, it breaks the pattern he's used to. He starts to wonder what you're doing, who you're becoming, and why he feels your absence more than your presence. That curiosity is powerful, and it doesn't come from strategy. It comes from authenticity. It's not about pretending to be busy. It's about being busy, being immersed in things that light you up, challenge you, and expand you. Maybe that's your work. Maybe it's a new fitness goal. Maybe it's spending time with people who see and value you deeply. When you start redirecting all that emotional energy you once poured into trying to fix or understand him, and you pour it back into yourself, something inside you changes. You stop needing him to validate your worth. You stop trying to convince him to see you. And ironically, that's often when he starts to. Because people can feel when you're holding your breath, waiting for their attention. They can also feel when you've exhaled, let go, and return to your own rhythm. That return is magnetic. It's not a tactic. It's not a game. It's the most honest thing you can do. You're saying, I'm not going to press pause on my joy, my growth, or my standards just because you're unsure. That level of self-prioritization doesn't push the right man away. It draws him closer because he sees that being with you is not about filling a void in your life. It's about joining someone who's already full and adding value, not becoming your entire source of it. This is where emotional maturity comes in. Instead of spiraling over his silence, you zoom out and remind yourself who you were before he came along and who you still are. You remember that you've built joy without him before, and you can do it again. And in that energy, you're not cold, you're not bitter, you're just unavailable for emotional breadcrumbs. You're available for connection that feels mutual, not one-sided. You're available for effort, not confusion. And when he senses that, he has a choice. He can either rise to meet you in that space or get left behind. Either way, you remain centered. Because a woman with a life, with a mission, with her own fire, that kind of woman doesn't chase, she attracts. Not by force, but by being so full of her own light that anyone who wants to be part of it has to show up fully or step aside. One of the most powerful things you can do when a man starts to pull away is to stop doing anything at all. Not in a passive or helpless way, but in a deliberate, grounded way that creates space. Because sometimes space is the only thing that allows the truth to surface. When you're constantly filling the silence, reaching out, checking in, analyzing, over-explaining, you don't give the situation enough room to breathe. You don't give him the chance to actually feel your absence or reflect on his own behavior. And more importantly, you don't give yourself the clarity that comes from stepping back and simply observing what happens when you stop reaching for someone. When you stop trying to force connection, you allow the truth of the relationship to unfold. Does he miss you? Does he come forward without being prompted? Or does he stay silent and disappear into the distance? Whatever the answer is, you get something that's far more valuable than temporary comfort. You get reality. And reality, even when it stings, is always better than fantasy. Because at least with reality, you know what you're working with. You're no longer guessing, hoping, or building castles in your head based on who someone could be if only you said the right thing or tried a little harder. You're watching what they actually choose to do without your interference. This isn't about manipulation or playing hard to get. It's about emotional clarity. When someone pulls away and you respond by pulling back, not from fear, but from self-respect, you make space for a real answer. You stop trying to convince or chase. You stop making excuses. You just allow. And in that stillness, you find out whether the connection was ever truly mutual. You see if he comes back because he genuinely values you, or if he only returns when it's convenient, when he's bored, or when he needs ego validation. That distinction matters. It tells you everything you need to know about where you stand. Most people are afraid of this part because it requires you to surrender control. It asks you to sit in uncertainty and resist the urge to fix. But ironically, this is the moment you gain the most power. Not by doing more, but by doing less. You reclaim your energy. You stop leaking emotional strength into someone who may not even notice you're pouring. You hold your center, and from that place you can make decisions based on what is, not what you wish it were. Sometimes when you pull back, a man realizes what he's lost. He feels the shift, and if he truly values the connection, he'll step back in willingly, clearly, without pressure. And if he doesn't, you didn't lose him. You lost the illusion that he was ever fully present in the first place. Either way, you win. Because silence reveals what words often cover up. It shows you whether there's substance beneath the surface or just temporary interest dressed up as potential. When you're brave enough to let go of control and allow that truth to show up, you don't just find out who he is, you find out who you are. You realize you're someone who doesn't beg, doesn't chase, and doesn't shrink in the face of distance. You're someone who lets go of what's uncertain to make room for what's real. And in that space, clarity always comes. When a man distances himself and ignores you, your power lies not in chasing answers or clinging to his presence, but in how you respond to the silence. Every action you take in that moment teaches him how to treat you, reflects your inner worth, and shapes the future of the connection. Distance doesn't always mean he doesn't care, but how you handle that space reveals everything about who you are and what you're willing to accept. By not reacting impulsively, by refusing to chase, by leaning into your own life and letting go of what's not choosing you, you protect your peace and raise your standards. You stop trying to earn love and start letting it reveal itself. Real connection never needs to be begged for, and the more you remain grounded, centered, and full in your own presence, the more you attract what's aligned with your value and release what's not. Let silence speak, let distance reveal, and always remember, the right person won't leave you confused. They'll leave you seen, safe, and certain.